In the quiet town along the California coast, a kind young man stopped to help a girl he didn't even know. What began as a simple act of fixing her broken wheelchair soon turned into something far greater, a story of kindness that touched a billionaire mother's heart and proved that sometimes the smallest actions create the biggest miracles. Like, share, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's get started. It was a warm morning in Malibu, California, the sun rising softly over the Pacific, painting gold across the glass windows of the Carter mansion. Lily Carter, only 19, sat quietly in her wheelchair near the garden patio. The ocean breeze brushed her hair, and for a moment she closed her eyes, pretending life still felt normal. Once full of laughter, she now lived in the quiet rhythm of wheels instead of footsteps. The world outside the gate still moved fast, but hers had slowed down the day the accident took her ability to walk. Her mother, Grace Carter, a successful real estate billionaire, tried everything: private doctors, advanced therapies, even experimental treatments overseas. Nothing brought Lily back to her old self. Grace provided comfort in every way possible: luxury, care, and security. But what Lily missed most wasn't comfort, it was independence. She wanted to feel capable again, to do small things herself without being watched or helped every second. It wasn't pity she needed, it was purpose. That morning, Lily had asked her driver to bring the car around front. She was supposed to attend an art class in town, a small step toward reclaiming a normal life. But as she rolled her wheelchair toward the gate, a sharp sound broke the calm. The chair tilted slightly, and one of the wheels came loose. Lily gasped, nearly losing her balance. The right wheel had cracked at the joint. "No, not again," she whispered, frustration rising in her chest. The driver had already gone, and the mansion's staff were inside. She looked around the empty street. The only sound was the ocean waves and the faint hum of traffic in the distance. She tried to fix the broken wheel herself, twisting the metal pin with trembling hands. Her fingers shook and sweat beaded on her forehead, but the wheel refused to move. "Come on," she muttered, her voice breaking. A feeling of helplessness washed over her, the same one she'd fought since the accident. She hated feeling fragile, and the broken chair reminded her how much she depended on others. Just then, an old Ford pickup truck rolled down the road, its paint faded and its engine humming with age. The driver was Ethan Miller, a 28-year-old local craftsman known around town for repairing everything from furniture to bikes. He'd been on his way to deliver a repaired table when he spotted Lily struggling near the driveway. Her long brown hair shimmered in the sun, and her face, young but tired, reflected silent frustration. Without a second thought, Ethan slowed down, parked by the curb, and stepped out. "Hey, you okay there?" he asked, walking closer. Lily looked up, startled. She wasn't used to strangers approaching her. I'm fine," she replied quickly, though her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. Ethan crouched beside the chair and inspected the broken wheel. "Looks like the axle bolt snapped," he said, touching the joint gently. "Mind if I take a look?" Lily hesitated. He looked simple. Jeans, worn boots, a tool belt hanging at his side, but his eyes carried honesty. She nodded. "Sure," she murmured softly. Ethan pulled a small toolkit from his truck and knelt beside her wheelchair. The tools clinked as he worked, tightening screws and replacing a small pin from his spare parts box. Lily watched him silently, noticing the roughness of his hands, the calmness in his movements. He didn't talk much, just focused. Within minutes, the chair stood steady again. "Try it now," he said with a small grin. Lily hesitated, then gently rolled forward. The wheel moved smoothly, no wobble, no noise. Her eyes widened in surprise. "It's perfect," she said quietly. Ethan smiled, wiping his hands on a rag. "It's not perfect," he replied, "just fixed for now. You might need a new wheel soon." Lily nodded, still processing what had just happened. Most people saw her and looked away, unsure what to say or do. But Ethan had treated her like anyone else, just someone who needed a bit of help. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but sincere. Ethan shrugged. "No big deal, just doing what anyone would do." But Lily knew not everyone would stop. For a moment, silence lingered between them. The sound of seagulls echoed overhead, and the breeze lifted strands of Lily's hair. She looked at him curiously. "Do you always carry tools around?" she asked with a faint smile. Ethan chuckled. "Pretty much. Fixing things is what I do. Tables, chairs, doors, you name it." He paused and glanced at her wheelchair. "Never fixed one of these before, though." Lily smiled wider this time. "Well, you did better than the last mechanic who worked on it." Ethan laughed softly. "Guess I got lucky." As Ethan packed up his tools, Lily couldn't help but study him. He wasn't polished or rich like the people her mother dealt with. He had grease on his shirt, sunburn on his neck, and a quiet confidence that didn't need to be loud. "You're really good at this," she said. "You should see my workshop," he replied, smiling. "It's a mess, but everything in there has a story." He waved lightly as he turned to leave. "Take care, all right?" Lily nodded, her eyes following him until his old truck disappeared down the street. When she rolled back toward the mansion, something inside her felt lighter. It wasn't just that the wheelchair was fixed. It was that someone had seen her not as a billionaire's daughter or a girl in a chair, but as a person. That small act of kindness had touched a part of her that money couldn't reach. For the first time in a long while, she felt human again. She didn't know Ethan's full story yet, but she hoped somehow fate would cross their paths again. Inside the mansion, Grace looked out from the balcony, watching her daughter return. There was something different about Lily's face, a calmness, almost a smile. Grace didn't know what had happened outside those gates, but for the first time in years, she sensed something she hadn't felt before in her daughter. Hope. She whispered softly to herself, maybe she met someone kind. Little did she know, that small moment by the roadside was only the beginning of a story that would soon change all of their lives forever. Later that evening, the sun dipped behind the Malibu hills, casting long orange shadows across the Carter estate. Inside, Grace Carter stood by her office window, reviewing financial reports on her sleek laptop. But her focus kept drifting to her daughter, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since returning home. When Grace finally walked into Lily's room, she noticed the wheelchair, repaired neatly, rolling perfectly smooth. "The mechanic came?" she asked the housekeeper. The woman shook her head. "No, ma'am. Some man passing by helped her." Grace frowned slightly, curiosity stirring. "A stranger?" she murmured. Lily was in her art studio upstairs, sketching near the window. She looked peaceful, more at ease than she had in months. When her mother entered, she smiled softly. "Mom, someone fixed my chair today." Grace raised a brow. "Someone who?" Lily hesitated, then replied, "A man named Ethan. He saw me struggling and stopped to help. He didn't ask for money or anything, he just helped." Grace listened quietly. Her daughter rarely talked about anyone outside her small circle, and there was something different in her tone, something warm, almost grateful. That night, Grace couldn't shake the thought. Billionaire families like hers were used to deals, contracts, and obligations, never pure kindness. People didn't just help without expecting something. Still, her daughter's smile had been genuine. The next morning, Grace asked her assistant to find out who this Ethan Miller was. Within hours, the report was on her desk. He lived in a modest home near the old downtown district, ran a small repair workshop, and often volunteered fixing old furniture for local community centers. A simple man, honest, hard-working. Grace made a decision. She wanted to meet him. When Ethan got the unexpected call from Grace's secretary inviting him to the Carter residence, he thought it was a mistake. "You want me to come to the mansion?" he asked. "Yes, ma'am would like to thank you personally," the assistant replied. Ethan chuckled nervously but agreed. The next afternoon, he cleaned his truck, changed into his best shirt, a simple white button-down, and drove to the gates of the estate. The guards checked his ID before letting him through. As he drove up the long driveway, surrounded by gardens and fountains, he couldn't help but feel out of place. Grace greeted him in the grand living room, her elegance striking but distant. "Mr. Miller," she said with a polite smile. "Thank you for helping my daughter." Ethan nodded, slightly uncomfortable. "Oh, just Ethan, Mom. It wasn't a big deal." The wheel was loose. I fixed it. Grace offered him a seat and gestured to an envelope on the table. I insist on compensating you for your time. Ethan's eyes flicked to the envelope, then back to her. I can't take that, he said quietly. I didn't do it for money. Grace looked at him, surprised by his tone, calm but firm. You should, she said gently. Everyone deserves to be paid for their work. Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe, but some things shouldn't be about money. She needed help, and I was there. That's all. His words were simple, but they hit Grace harder than she expected. In her world, everything had a price. Gratitude, favors, even loyalty, all came with strings attached. But here stood a man who saw none of that. For a moment she was speechless. Well, she said finally, you've made quite an impression on my daughter. Ethan shrugged. She didn't need pity. She just needed her chair fixed. Grace offered him tea, curious to know more about him. As they talked, she learned about his late father, a carpenter who'd taught him the value of craftsmanship and kindness. Ethan spoke about his small-town upbringing, his love for fixing things, and his belief that every broken object, like every broken person, could be made whole again with patience. Grace listened quietly, realizing how different his world was from hers. The sincerity in his voice made her reflect on how distant she'd grown from such simplicity. For the first time in years, someone's humility made her pause. When Lily rolled into the room, her face brightened at the sight of him. "Ethan," she said warmly. He turned, smiling. "Hey, how's the chair holding up?" "Better than ever," she said with a grin. Grace noticed the easy connection between them, the way her daughter's eyes lit up when she spoke to him. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was something deeper, trust. Ethan talked to her like she was normal, not fragile. Grace's throat tightened. For years, she had tried to buy that kind of happiness for her daughter, and failed. After Ethan left, Grace stood silently by the window, watching his old truck disappear down the winding driveway. There were no fancy goodbyes, no long conversations, just quiet gratitude, yet something about him lingered. That night, she visited Lily's room again. Her daughter was sketching Ethan's truck, a soft smile on her lips. "You really like him, don't you?" Grace asked. Lily looked up. "He didn't treat me like a patient or a project, Mom. He just saw me." Grace nodded, her chest tightening. "That's rare," she whispered. "People who see others without judgment." In the days that followed, Ethan went back to his ordinary life, fixing tables, patching fences, mending chairs for old neighbors. But sometimes, when he closed his shop late at night, he thought about Lily, her courage, her quiet strength, the way she smiled when her chair moved smoothly again. Meanwhile, in her mansion, Grace found herself thinking of Ethan too, of how one stranger with nothing to gain had reminded her of something she'd forgotten long ago: compassion. Neither of them knew it yet, but fate was far from done with their story. A week passed since Ethan's visit, and the Carter mansion had slowly returned to its usual rhythm: meetings, business calls, and quiet dinners. But inside Lily's heart, something had shifted. She spent more time outdoors now, painting by the garden or watching the sunset from the porch. The air felt lighter. Her broken chair had become a symbol of something else, a reminder that not all broken things stay that way. One afternoon, as she stared at the ocean, she whispered to herself, "I wish I could thank him properly." She didn't know Ethan was thinking the same. At his small workshop downtown, Ethan sat surrounded by scraps of metal and wood. The place smelled of sawdust and oil, the walls covered in tools and half-finished projects. But that day, something different occupied his mind. Lily. He remembered her gentle smile, her determination despite her pain. He knew her wheelchair worked fine, but deep down, he wanted to do more. She deserved something better, something built with care, not just repaired. That night, under the dim light of a single bulb, Ethan began sketching. A new design, a chair unlike anything she'd ever had. For 3 days straight, he worked tirelessly. He welded lightweight aluminum, added custom wheels, and designed ergonomic padding to ease pressure. The armrests folded easily, the structure glided smoothly on any surface, and the seat adjusted for comfort. He even engraved her initials, LC, on the backrest. Every bolt, every weld carried intention. He didn't tell anyone what he was doing. It wasn't for business or recognition. It was for kindness, for the quiet gratitude he saw in her eyes that day. By the fourth evening, the wheelchair stood complete, strong, elegant, and full of heart. When he loaded it into his truck the next morning, he wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do. What if her mother thought he was overstepping? What if she refused it? But his gut told him to go anyway. As he pulled up to the Carter gates, the security guard recognized him instantly. "Mr. Miller, welcome back," the guard said, smiling. Within minutes, Grace appeared at the door, slightly surprised but not unkind. "Ethan," she greeted. "Is something wrong?" He shook his head, smiling nervously. "No, ma'am, I just built something for Lily. Thought she might like it." Grace looked puzzled but gestured for him to come inside. "She's in the garden," she said softly. Ethan walked through the marble hallway, his boots echoing faintly against the polished floor. When he stepped outside, Lily was there, sketchbook in hand, surrounded by sunlight and flowers. She looked up, her face lighting up instantly. "Ethan!" she said with joy. He grinned. "Hey, I've got a surprise for you." He wheeled the chair forward, sleek silver, soft cushions, polished handles. Lily's eyes widened in disbelief. "You built this?" she whispered. Ethan nodded shyly. "Thought you deserved something better than a repair." Tears welled in Lily's eyes as she rolled closer. The craftsmanship was flawless, but what touched her most wasn't the design, it was the thought behind it. "No one's ever done something like this for me," she said, her voice trembling. Ethan smiled gently. "Well, now someone has." Grace, watching from the patio, froze in silence. She felt an ache in her chest as she saw her daughter touch the new chair like it was something sacred. Without hesitation, Lily sat in it. Her hands gripped the wheels and she pushed forward. The motion was smooth, effortless, freeing. She laughed, a real laugh. The sound filled the air, light and pure. Ethan couldn't help but smile, but when he turned, he saw Grace standing still, her hand over her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. For years, she had spent millions trying to bring that sound back, the sound of her daughter's laughter. Yet here it was, returned not by doctors or machines, but by a simple man with a kind heart. She stepped closer, her voice shaking. "Ethan." He looked at her, slightly nervous. "Ma'am?" Grace exhaled, her eyes glistening. "You've done more for my daughter than anyone ever has." "Thank you." Ethan shook his head. "I didn't do much," he said humbly. "She's the strong one. I just built the chair." Grace smiled through her tears. "No, you gave her something money couldn't buy. Hope." Lily rolled up beside them, her cheeks glowing. "He's right, Mom. I didn't just get a chair. I got my freedom back." Grace knelt beside her daughter, stroking her hair gently. "I haven't seen you this happy in years." Lily looked at Ethan. "He reminded me that being broken doesn't mean you stop moving." For a moment, all three of them stood in quiet, beautiful stillness. That night, Grace invited Ethan to stay for dinner. The conversation was easy, filled with laughter and genuine warmth. They spoke about life, dreams, and the strange ways people cross paths. Grace listened to Ethan's simple wisdom, how he saw beauty in imperfection and believed kindness could fix more than tools ever could. When dinner ended, Grace walked him out to his truck. "Ethan," she said softly, "people like you are rare. If there's ever anything you need, anything at all, you have my word. I'll be there." Ethan smiled. "Just keep smiling, ma'am. That's enough." As he drove away under the starlit sky, Ethan felt something he hadn't in a long time. Peace. Inside the mansion, Grace watched from the balcony, her heart full, while Lily sat in her new wheelchair by the window, whispering, "Thank you." In a world obsessed with wealth and perfection, one act of kindness had restored faith in something deeper, humanity. The next morning, the sunlight poured through Lily's room bright and golden. And though life would move on, the memory of that day, of kindness, gratitude, and tears, would stay with them forever.